moving forward, we will now begin our budget discussion, and I think a good place for us to begin is with a document that Councilman Sohn has prepared for us.
We had a very, very productive meeting earlier this week on Thursday morning. In attendance were the three members of the subcommittee, myself, Dr. Pruitt, Ellie Katz. Manager was here. The township attorney was in attendance. A big chunk of the meeting that we held on Thursday morning was dedicated to a presentation from the township attorney. Council member Castle and I, along with Dr. Pruitt, had met with the township attorney before Mr. Castle and I took office, and had spoken about our goal and objective at a very broad level of seeing lower legal expenditures. Mr. Turretz had reviewed the legal expenditures on everything that is non-adversarial, everything that is not related to lawsuits or other adversarial proceedings such as tax appeals, and had come up with a number of approximately $300,000 per annum based on data from the past 3.5 years. The full calendar years 11, 12, 13, and plus the first half of 2014. And based on that, he proposed making a significant change in his retainer. His current retainer is $36,000 payable in 12 monthly payments, but there's a very small number of items that are included within, and to basically take all non-litigation, non-adversarial proceedings and move that in there. And in lieu of the $300,000 per year that is spent mostly on the $36,000 plus a la carte $150 an hour, this would be converted and capped at $19,750 per month, which would be a total of $237,000, which would be 20% less on those expenditures. Believe you me, I would love to see every other department come in with cuts of 20% for their expenditures. There was a specification that this would start as of October 1st, so there would be savings of approximately $5,000 per month compared to our baseline for the past 3.5 years. That would achieve savings of $15,000 in calendar year 2014, but going into calendar year 2015 on an annualized basis, that would be a reduction on that baseline of $60,000. The initial proposal that Mr. Turretz offered did not include any litigation related to OPRA and OPMA issues. And after further discussion, based on a suggestion that I had made, we had discussed, Mr. Turretz had raised the issue, he is not always notified in timely fashion. He wants to make sure that whatever guidance he provides is addressed. And at my suggestion, if Mr. Turretz indicated that if he were notified within a business day or two, if the guidelines on how to handle any OPRA or OPMA issues were addressed, that it would be included in the $237,000 per annum retainer. I feel, and this is my personal feeling, and this was discussed there, that if we did that, if we could have an opportunity, this is part of our bigger issue of coming up with processes on the OPRA-OPMA issue to make sure that these are addressed, are logged. I do want to thank, and this was separate and independent, but Jamie Evelina had arranged for Mr. Castle and myself. Mr. Rupp had independently participated in a webinar from a firm, GovQA, that provides a tracking tool that would allow residents, reporters, folks from the suburbanite to go online to fill out a form, and that also could be used to track. Make sure that the attorney is notified, make sure that we are addressing those issues. But on this baseline, just looking at the proposals that Mr. Turretz made, this would be a $75,000 savings, most of which would be in calendar 2015. We also discussed further issues regarding the budget, and I think there was a tremendous recognition, and some of this came up in Good and Welfare, that there's there's a difference between budget cuts and spending cuts. There is a lot of money every year that rolls into surplus based on unexpended budgetary items in excess of $2 million a year. Many of those positions, whether it's firefighters or park rangers or dispatchers that we have not hired, could be cut out of the budget, but the net effect of that, and I think Mr. Broughton would confirm this with significant eagerness, is cutting surplus in the upcoming year. If we cut out all these positions, and Dr. Rasheen is absolutely correct, it does, a lot of these add up to $780,000. If we cut that out of the budget, we would be cutting surplus next year by $780,000. And I think, as Mr. Garbarini indicated, that's where we start hitting the red line. That's where we start getting too low. What we need to start doing is looking at not just cutting budget, but cutting spending. One of the things that we discussed, and I know that this is something that my two distinguished colleagues on the subcommittee, Dr. Pruitt and Mr. Katz, had spent a lot of time going around on circles on, was the definition of a hiring freeze. We did discuss the possibility of looking significantly at a hiring freeze, not only through year-end 2014, but including 2015. When there's an episode of The Simpsons where Homer Simpson was informed about this Japanese word, this Chinese word about, and he says, chrysotunity. We have a chrysotunity here. And we need to take advantage of our chrysotunity, and this chrysotunity does not end in 2014. The CFO's numbers for this year include a tax levy increase of 3.6%, but you don't pay the tax levy, you pay the tax rate. And the numbers that we'd be looking at would be about 5.25%. 2015 is even worse for other reasons. Revaluation is going to give some people cuts, but will give other people big increases just based on the changes in their valuation. And the number that the CFO is estimating is an increase of 5.47%. So between these 2 years, we could see increases of about 11%. And I don't think you have to be a senior in order to see that that's a problem. And I think we need to start looking at every single number. One of the suggestions that we made and that we had a very broad consensus is that we should be going back to departments. There's in essence both top-down and bottom-up issues. We can go bottom-up and look at certain items and say you're spending too much on this or this is unnecessary, but also to go top-down to say how can we make cuts, and to ask managers department by department to go through and look in a range of about on an annualized range of about 2 to 5%, and to give us a menu of potential cuts that we could make. And to echo something that Dr. Rasheen offered, I think Dr. Pruitt has seen as a member of the Board of Education that the business administrator does a wonderful job of giving the Board of Education a series of choices. Here are potential cuts that could be made. And rather than going through a budget and trying to second guess, is to give the managers the flexibility to make the cuts that they think are most effective, that can offer us the biggest bang for the buck, that can still offer the residents the services they're looking for, that can still, without firing people, but have the flexibility to cut that budget not only in 14 when we only have half a year left, but also in 15. I think that this pretty much summarizes the results. Boy, it seemed like a very long hour meeting that we had, but I think we did accomplish a great deal, and I would appreciate any further input from Dr. Pruitt as to your thoughts about our subcommittee.
Yeah, let me just add one piece. When we got into a good discussion, we began to talk about the 3 months left and next year, so that it's not the kind of a situation where we can take care of 2013 or 2014 and not have an impact on the coming year. So that, this is a really I'll say it's a very committed budget committee. And we have made some recommendations for people to look at, and I believe that cutting spending is a very important aspect of this whole thing. And I want to commend Alan for capturing all this stuff on this 2 pieces of paper, because it was a kind of a rip-roaring discussion, you might say.
Councilman Stone, if you could elaborate on just a couple of things. I mean, we discussed it, but I think it's probably important for the public to hear as well, since 7 mines have access to information, and then there are about 40,000 other mines that also have access to the same information, and input is welcome. But in going through these types of things and talking about cutting our spending, and really actually going back a bit further and talking about what Councilman Pruitt and Deputy Mayor Katz went round for round in the last council about a freeze, a hiring freeze. Were you able to define hiring freeze as opposed to? I mean, was there some consensus on that? And the reason I ask is because I know that we've hired a couple of township employees over the past, let's say, 3 months in areas where we actually needed them, for our safety net, whether it was police or fire. But did you come to a consensus on what hiring freeze was, and is that a recommendation?
Yes, as a subcommittee, our consensus was that we should have a hard hiring freeze through year-end 2015, that we should not be filling any vacancies as they become available unless the council agrees that those vacancies should be filled, either based on significant public need and emergency, or that we are better off financially, for example, that it would cut overtime usage or other reasons where we can justify that and reach consensus on that hiring. And that this should go not just through year-end 2014, but that this should be in place through year-end 2015.
So basically what you're saying is for the positions that have been funded, that the council has funded, that should a vacancy come up throughout the year, that those positions should not be filled?
That was the consensus, and again,
I'm asking.
Correct, that was our consensus. There was something.
Let me say what I believe we agreed to or suggested, that the bodies working in TNEC today will be the same bodies working in TNEC at the end of 2014. The same number of people. Now, if there is some kind of crisis that we have to deal with, we have to deal with that when it occurs. But no additional hiring of personnel, period.
The same individuals, not the same number of individuals.
Same.
The consensus that we discussed, and again, I think this was the same issue in the Pruitt-Katz debate at the other go-around, was whether, again, if we have 370 employees, do we maintain 370 and not go above, or as an employee leaves, we ratchet down unless we decide to refill that. The discussion that we had, as I understood it, was that we would keep on ratcheting down, that if a vacancy becomes available, that we would not fill that in unless there was consensus vote for nodding heads that we wanted to fill that spot. Towards that end, one of the things that we asked for, and I think is really crucial to see, is a listing of the positions in the budget. There are many, 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 many more positions in the budget that are not only unfilled, they were never intended to be filled. And the opportunity to whether it's firefighters, whether it's dispatchers, whether it's SLEOs, whether it's an engineer, there are many positions in the budget that are there for the purpose of not being spent. And it really becomes very, very difficult to manage around that without having an understanding of what the actual positions are, who's on the staff, to identify the position, and then to identify whether the position is vacant or who is filling that position, so that we know who those people are with associated pay information, so that we can look ahead to next year or 2 years ahead and anticipate whether it's with a step, whether it's with an increase that's guaranteed based on negotiations, so that we know where those numbers are. The numbers that were provided by the CFO for wages that estimate for 15, 16, 17 were done by adding 2%. That's a good guess, but that's just a guess. We have an opportunity to look at those positions and see how they can be filled, should be filled, and how we can use those positions most effectively.
I guess what my issue is, and then I'll let the manager respond, is that if we fund the position at the beginning of the year and it becomes vacant at the end of the year, why would council think that that position is not needed at the end of the year? If there's a need for the position, there's a need for the position. And I don't think that council should get into the business of hiring and managing the town. I think that that's the role of the manager. If the position is not needed, then it should be eliminated, period, at any point in the budget process. So that's what, I have a concern with that.
Can I-
And I want the manager to respond to that.
I think that you said,
Before you go, William,
okay,
we're in a situation where we have to really do something. And if we're not saying to fire anybody, but we are saying that personnel is a very large figure, and if we can manage it better, then we need to look to do that.